All right, look, we got to have a conversation because sometimes in fantasy football, you have players that you just fall in love with. These are the players that it doesn't matter what somebody offers you in the trade room. They are not available. I'm not fielding offers on these players. You're going to have to overpay me by a mile to even get me to consider trading these players off of my fantasy football teams. And it might just be because they are high producing assets, players I like rooting for as a fan, or players that maybe are undervalued in my mind, and I have to see this through. So today, I have 6 players like that from my own fantasy football teams. That is the #1 rule for this video, is I have to have these players on at least 1 or 2 of my own fantasy football teams. If they're not on one of my rosters, I probably didn't care enough about them in the first place for them to be eligible for this list. So 6 players I refuse to trade in my fantasy football leagues. If this is your first time to the channel, make sure you are subscribed, but let's hop right into this video. All right, so the first player that I am never trading in my fantasy football leagues is going to be Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills. Look, I get it. In Dynasty fantasy football, people talk about age. You want the guys that are going to be 22, 23, 24 years old. And Josh Allen, the way that he has played so far throughout the course of his career, at 30 years old, you would think that, hey, there's some wear and tear on this body. And a lot of people, probably smart people, are saying you should explore selling high, getting the most amount of value out of Josh Allen right now at this point in time. And I'm telling you, I don't care. I do not care. Josh Allen is a player with 6 straight seasons as a top 2 overall quarterback, 4 of those being the #1 quarterback in fantasy football. And this is a player who has sentimental value to me from a Dynasty fantasy football perspective. This is a guy that I was in on in his draft class. He ended up becoming the best fantasy football quarterback for me, and I have had him on one of my Dynasty fantasy football teams from the startup over 5+ years ago all the way until now. He is the only player on my team that has never been traded. If you go look at the transaction history on this guy, it says drafted by Andrew Tutru and nobody else. It's going to stay this way until the day that Josh Allen is no longer playing football. I don't care if people think that you should be capitalizing and getting the most bang for your buck and down tiering and doing all of that. There is nothing about Josh Allen that scares me. And even if he does fall off a cliff down the road 3, 4, 5 years from now, I don't care because I got all of that production on my team. The arm talent is insane. The rushing upside is insane. This is a player that you will never see me trade off of my fantasy football team. One of my favorite players in the NFL, Josh Allen. Let's talk about another player that you could not get me to trade you for a reasonable price off of my roster right now. And it's Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know what it is. I'm not really sure what it is about Emeka Egbuka, but there's something about him that just makes me feel like he is next up. He's one of these wide receivers that can finish as a top 12 option in fantasy football, a true wide receiver 1. You have the departure of Mike Evans, and it just makes me think that there's better days on the horizon, and the flashes that we saw in the early parts of his rookie season, that is what is to come for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and especially Emeka Egbuka. I just think this is a player who is super talented. I liked him in last year's pre-draft process. He was a player that the landing spot originally made me feel a little bit skeptical of how much volume he was actually going to get because of the 2 wide receivers that were ahead of him in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But when you get a first-round wide receiver like this who ends up going into NFL training camp and making waves, and everything they were talking about all early offseason last year was how impressive Emeka Egbuka was, and then you go out and produce very early on before Tampa Bay is just dismantled by injuries at basically every single position, Emeka and Baker included. It just gets me really excited about what the overall ceiling can be. I have toyed in my own Dynasty fantasy football rankings at times of, do I actually like Emeka Egbuka over a guy like Teteroa McMillan? I have them both in the same tier, and I love T-Mac, don't get me wrong, but Emeka Egbuka feels like his ceiling is even higher, and I don't know if that is actually even legitimate or not. It's just a feeling that I have deep down inside of me. I think Emeka Egbuka is going to be one of these top wide receivers that we're going to be building around for years and years to come. So this is a guy that I have on a few of my fantasy football teams. If you were to come and say, Andrew, what is it going to take for you to get Emeka Egbuka off of your roster? I'm going to be unreasonable with you. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra. I need to upgrade to those guys to get rid of Emeka, and it sounds crazy, but that's how I'm viewing him today. You cannot pay me to get him off my roster. Now let's move on and talk about another player I am never trading. It's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs, running back for the Detroit Lions. Look, I have Jahmyr Gibbs in almost every single Dynasty league that I play in, and that's because I drafted drafted him in almost all of my rookie drafts just a few years ago when he was in that rookie class with Bijan Robinson. Now, if you wanted to go through the time, you wanted to scroll down the videos list on this channel, you would find videos of me talking about Jahmyr Gibbs being in the same breath as Bijan Robinson before the NFL Combine, before he was drafted that year. And at the time, not a lot of people were telling you that. That was one of my takes that I was in on very early. It's obviously paid off massively so far, and this is a guy who has the type of skill set that's going to age like fine wine at the NFL level. Not to even talk about the fact that David Montgomery is now out of town, so if you liked all of the production you were getting from Jahmyr Gibbs already, it's only going to get better as the Lions start to give him even more of that rushing share, more of the receiving share. Jared Goff is just checking the football down at a very high rate to running backs. All of this stuff right now that you just look at Jahmyr Gibbs and say, how can it not be great for him for the foreseeable future? This is a guy that I'm locking in as a top 3 dynasty running back for at least the next 3 years, unless there's a major injury, and that is just the risk you take of the running back position. But a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs is somebody that I could see giving us an Alvin Kamara-esque type of career. And if you go back and you look at the season-long logs for a guy like Alvin Kamara, look at the production that you got for how long you got it for. That's what I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to do, and it doesn't matter if you give me Bijan Robinson. It doesn't matter if you give me anything. I know he's already one of the most highest valued running backs in fantasy. There's nothing you can offer me. He's not available. It's not in the range of outcomes. You will never get him off my fantasy football team. Now let's talk about another wide receiver. This is a guy who I have to see it through. It hasn't been as good as I wished it would have been, but I have to see this through. You can't get me to sell him right now. The value's too low and I value him too highly. It's Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Look, Rome was on track for a breakout last year, and you look at the early season production, and there was a lot of touchdowns that were going his way, but he got hurt, and then everything fell apart for him and the rest of his fantasy football season. I have a feeling inside of me that that was the start of the breakout, and had he had a healthy year the entire rest of the season, this would be a player we would be talking about much more highly in fantasy football circles. So he is somebody that I just have to see through at this point in time. You look at the situation for him, I think he has a demon at the quarterback in Caleb Williams who can do some very special things with the football. That is probably the most glaze you're going to get from me as a Vikings fan on the Chicago Bears, but I also think that they have a very good play caller in the NFL in Ben Johnson, probably a top 5 play caller right now. So this situation with DJ Moore now out of town, more targets going to get consolidated amongst the big 3 options that they have there in Luther Burden and Colston Loveland and Rome Odunze. I actually am one of the people that is under the belief that Rome Odunze still has the edge as the #1 wide receiver in this offense, and I think he's going to see the most targets in this offense when it's all said and done at the end of the year. So give me Rome Odunze right now at cost. If you're trying to buy him off of my roster, you can't. I value him too highly, and you're not going to want to accept the deal that it's going to take for me to move off of Rome Odunze. Now let's go back to the running back position, because there's one more running back right now that I have on some of my dynasty teams that is unavailable by all means necessary. It's Jeremiyah Love, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. Look, if you have Jeremiyah Love on a roster, it means you earned that 101, and if you didn't earn the 101, it means you traded a lot to go get that 101, because Jeremiyah Love is a special talent at the running back position. He is a player that if you were to tell me today, 1 or 2 years from this point in time, we're talking about Jeremiyah Love in the same breath as the guys like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, I would not be surprised at all. When I look at my running back rankings, Jeremiyah Love, for the most part, is viewed as a consensus running back 5, running back 6 in Dynasty, depending on where you have him. Most people have him in that tier with Amarion Hampton and Devon Achane and even Ashton Jeanty to an extent. But for me, when I look at where I have Jeremiyah Love, the conversation starts at 4. I have him behind Bijan, Gibbs, and Ashton Jeanty, and that is it. I understand the situation for Jeremiyah Love is a situation where people aren't expecting the most upside from this offense as far as points scored goes. I mean, it's not the same type of situation as Jahmyr Gibbs that we talked about before, but situations change in the NFL. Talent does not. Jeremiyah Love has elite talent, and I love the rushing ability. I love the pass catching upside. I love everything about Jeremiyah Love's game, and there's just something about the kid that makes me want to root for him. When you look at these pre-draft interviews, all of the things like that, where you're just watching as a fan, fuck the fantasy football stuff, you're just watching as a fan, there's something about Jeremiyah that I just love, man. I root for him. I want him to be successful. He is somebody that is unavailable, and I'm seeing this through. I know we spent a pretty penny on him here in the rookie draft, but I think he is about to be be on a rocket ship to the top of Dynasty Fantasy Football startup drafts, because I truly believe that this is a player who's going to be a first-round startup pick sooner rather than later. Now, the last player that I want to talk about here in today's video is going to be another one of those players that I just have to see it through. It's going to be Bryant Jr., wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Look, could you offer me something that makes me get rid of BTJ? Absolutely, but it's going to be unreasonable still, because I have to believe that BTJ, there's something still in him somewhere. I know it wasn't good in year 2 of his NFL career, but there's something in there that can still give us close to that first year that we got from BTJ. This is a player that I had that literally wheeled me to a fantasy football championship in some of my leagues, because Bryant Jr. at the back half of his rookie season was dominating. The touchdowns were there, the receiving yards were there. Yes, Mac Jones was under center, but there was a lot of fantasy football production. And full disclosure here, I bought a Bryant Jr. jersey because he won me some fantasy football championships. So this is a player, I've seen the ceiling. Can he get close to it? I think we get a bounce back. That's what I'm counting in with Bryant Jr. And yes, there is some sentimental value with a player who goes out and wins you a dynasty championship. There always will be. But Bryant Jr. is a player that the injuries derailed last year. He should bounce back here in year 3, and he is somebody that I am going to have to be overpaid for if he's going to leave my roster. So there you guys have it. That is 6 players I am passionately opening up about, speaking from the heart for. Fuck the data, fuck the analytics, everything that you have that tells you the notes, whatever. I came just to speak from the heart. I had no notes today. So if you guys enjoyed today's video, it's a little bit different. It's just something I wanted to do. These players are unavailable. Doesn't matter what you give me. I love these guys. These are kind of my guys in fantasy right now on all of my fantasy football teams. But if you enjoyed today's video, do me the favor, hit the like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future content that we got coming around. And we're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, go help us hit that milestone. And last but not least, go join our free Discord. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today. I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.